Welcome to the Teacher's Pep Rally. If you missed our last episode with our business and entrepreneur teacher, Frank Sorakach, please go back and check it out. Our guest today has a teacher certification in K through 12 arts and secondary English. He has a PhD in language education and currently teaches at Georgia State University. Go Panthers. One area in particular that she specializes in is teacher education and mentoring. She's written a plethora of publications with a heavy emphasis on arts-based approaches to the teaching of English language arts. In 2013, I got to shout her out. She received the College of Education and Human Development's Outstanding Faculty Research Award. And in 2019, she was recognized with the CHD Outstanding Faculty Teaching Award for graduate teaching. Please welcome to the Teacher's Pep Rally, our guest, Dr. Michelle Zoss.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks.
What an amazing little thing I went through. And that's like a blip in stuff you've done. So I'm so excited that you are here. For those of our listeners that catch us on the YouTube channel, you'll see that I am representing in my Georgia State.
Yes.
I was thinking, tell us a little bit about you. You K through 12 certified, right? But
Yes.
You're teaching college. I'm curious how that journey happened. How did you end up where you are?
I went to lots of schools when I was a kid. My family was not in the military like yours was, Erin, but I moved around a lot. So I went to, I think it was 11 schools before I graduated from high school. I went to 6 elementary schools, a junior high, a middle school, and 3 high schools in 4 states. So I moved around a lot. And it was remarkable because teachers really saved me. Teachers were the ones who really made sure that I was taken care of in all of these different places. And I was always grateful for that. And I went to college and I studied art and I studied English and I studied German as well, because I got a minor in that too. And then I wasn't sure what to do with myself after I finished doing all of these degrees, because I was like, okay, great. And I took an extra painting class after I had finished my degree, and I was working as a dispatcher at the University of Iowa Police Department, and I was working in the gift wrapped and catalog department of JCPenney. So I was working 2 jobs and taking a painting class. And I was in this painting class one day and I was walking around and I had just talked to all of my classmates, and they were like, sort of telling me what they were thinking about what they were doing with their paintings or whatever. And I went out in the hallway and I sat down, and I was sitting next to a water fountain. And it turned on, and I was watching the pattern of these leaves, of the shadows of the leaves coming through the windows. And when the thing turned on, I was like, hey, wait a minute. If I became a teacher, I could talk to people about their thinking all day long and get paid for it. And I was like, wait a minute, what if I could be a teacher and I could help, do this cool thing, with kids. And I was like, oh, maybe I should do this. So I called my mentor from high school, who had driven me to the University of Iowa so that I could see the campus. Cause she was like, you know what? I think Iowa would be a really good place for you. And so I called her and I said, I think I might want to be a teacher, Mrs. Morrison. And she was like, well, Michelle, I've known that since you were a senior in high school, but I'm glad you finally figured that out. And so I went and I started taking classes and I got certified. I did all of the methods classes for K-12 art, all of the methods classes for English education. And then I student taught in both art and in English, sort of simultaneously. And I did half of the student teaching in Iowa City and half of it in a town called Staines, which is right outside of London. It's actually a quarter of a mile from Runnymede, where they signed the Magna Carta. So the name of the school was the Magna Carta School, which was super cool.
Fun facts.
That's cool.
Fun facts. And then while I was there, I interviewed with schools in Las Vegas, Nevada, because Las Vegas, Nevada was growing really fast. And took a job in Las Vegas, came home from Europe, moved from Iowa City to Las Vegas 9 days later. And then I started teaching art, and I taught K through 5 art. I had 1,700 students my first year between the different schools, because I was the extra art teacher. So I was at 3 different schools and there were 900 kids there. And then because of a variety of events that happened, I was only at one school. So I was teaching the other 700 kids that were there that I hadn't taught while I was doing the other 900. So it was brilliant. It was wonderful. And then, but I was like, you know what? I want to have different conversations with kids. And I started doing the All Stars program, which is called All Stars now, but then it was called like the Urban Games or something. And we were doing it at a high school, Clark High School. And I think we would have like 300 kids at a time making art with them. And the principal came over and he was like, man, you really know what you're doing. Because there was like 6 of us. It would be like all of us together. It would be the 5 of us and we'd have 300 kids and we'd have to like come up with an art activity for 2.5 hours in a gym with, no access to water.
Sounds like the Avengers. You're the art Avengers.
So the principal, Mr. Tanaka, said, you're really good at this. And we were all sort of together like we are right now. And several of the people that were there were like, oh yeah, do you have any art openings? And he was like, no, I'm sorry, I don't. And I said, do you have any English openings? And he said, as a matter of fact. And so I interviewed for a job with them. And then I taught for 2 years for English. And so when I was teaching English, I had kids who were drawing all the time. And I was using drawings to teach things. So we were taking notes and we were drawing and we were making these big, giant drawings in relation to the texts that we were doing and we had a literary fair at that school because they loved the idea of like science fair, but also literary fair. So all of the English teachers would create these 3-dimensional like installation art with their classes every year on a different theme. And so I did this and I loved it and it was great. That's cool. But I had to start explaining, we got a new principal eventually. And the new principal was like, well, I don't understand why you need markers or butcher paper or this, that, or the other. And I needed to be able to have some language to explain why this work that we were doing was important in English class, because the kids were loving it. Like what we were doing was exciting, but I didn't have all the language. So I went to graduate school so that I could learn that language. And that took me to Stanford and I did a master's degree there. And then while I was there, I had an email conversation with Peter Smagorinsky at the University of Georgia about some directions to help me do this research project that I was doing, which was creating an understanding of how to explain what arts integration is. And he was super helpful. And he was like, well, we've got a PhD program. And I said, that'd be great. I'll be applying. And so that's what brought me to Georgia is I worked with Peter and got my language education PhD and then interviewed for jobs, and Georgia State had an opening. And this is my 15th year now at Georgia State. And Erin was in like I think she was in like the 3rd or 4th cohort that I taught. And I still remember Erin's cohort because she and some of her colleagues are still teaching from that cohort, helping to run the world and department chairs and like amazing, amazing folks. And that's kind of how I got here. So now what I do, so if I meet people on the elevator, like, what do you do? And I said, well, I teach English teachers how to use visual art to teach English.
I love that. That's really cool. That's really cool.
So what I'm sitting here thinking about is, first of all, we've been hearing a lot lately, Dr. Zoss, because we've been asking this question, and a theme I'm hearing is that there's this, I don't know if you want to call it a universal push, or there's these signs, but there's something that in these people that are become educators, there's something that keeps pushing them towards that. And I guess, so I'm just thinking that there's all these signs, whether it's for you to be an educator or not out there. It's just that let's pay attention to what is being brought in front of us, because sometimes when we think, how come I never get to do anything? Or I always wanted to do this, but it never happened. It might have been in front of you that whole time. And that's when I was hearing your story, I kept thinking, holy cow, did the universe or all these things keep coming to you of who your true self, could be, and look what you've done.
And I think back on it now, like I had the great fortune of having encounters with educators at University of Georgia, at Stanford, at University of Iowa, in the high schools that I went to, the middle schools that I went to, where I had people who embraced the idea that I could express myself in both images and in language. So whenever there was the option in school to do a drawing instead of an essay, I always took it. But then the next time I would write the essay. So I was always sort of straddling these worlds of both art and English. And I was such a nerd that, and I'm also old enough that when I applied for college, it was when they used to send us postcards, and then we would fill out the postcards and then send it back, and then we get the brochures. And on those postcards, they would say, tell us your name and your address and what your potential major would be. And I wrote art and English. And I don't have very many colleagues in the academy who are like, they've been doing the same thing the whole time. But there's enough within these spaces that have been fulfilling and surprising for me for like my whole life. So, we're another sign of my hot self nerdiness. This is the room that we call the room of requirement, which is a reference to Harry Potter, because this is a multi-purpose room for us in our house. I teach in this room at night. My kids sometimes use it as a multimedia room. It's a guest room. It's all of these things. But, in this room and throughout my house, there are paintings hanging on the walls, and there are, and the work that I've written is like, now it's on the bookshelves too. So it's cool. Like, I feel like I get to be fully self-expressed as my own person. And thankfully I had teachers who recognized that in me. And that made all the difference, really.
I feel like this episode is a continuation of last week. With the diversify, take risks. I love that. I feel like I'm hearing that same theme, right? Our guest last week said, Elon Musk said, everything is a side gig, right? So why do we have to be just this one path or this one way?
Yeah.
And so I love how you've kind of merged your passions together to kind of just broaden and just be fully you, and then give permission for others to be fully who they are. So I love it. I'm on board.
Yay.
So what is that like though? So when so you have a ton of energy, and you could tell you're like, this is you.
I'm standing up, I'm like doing my thing.
Yeah, but it's awesome. And that would be so cool to receive in the classroom. So when you're teaching grad students, right? So, or candidates that, may not be ready for that. How do you encounter those kind of students that you need to kind of usher into this?
Yeah.
This mode of you're basically two modes of creativity, right? You're talking about the visual and so on. So what do you do with those students? How do you bring them in?
I try to make sure that they know from the get-go that I don't want them to become a mini me. They don't have to become mini Dr. Zoss. They need to become Aaron. They need to become Pete. They need to become Letitia. They need to become Fred. You need to be your best self, because your best self is going to create the relationships with the kids that you meet. And that person is the person I need in the schools. That's awesome. And I'm always telling them, I don't have any, I said, I have lots of things that I want to teach you, but they don't all fit into like a handy dandy little list or something. Like, I can't give you one book and say, this is all you need to teach. Instead, what I tell them is, I'm teaching you how to think like a teacher so that you'll know what to do when you don't know what to do.
Nice.
And that's totally from that idea of knowing what to do when you don't know what to do is what Dewey defined education as. And that's always, so I really want them to be themselves and be present, like be there, listen, look, see the kids, see who they are, see them in all of their glory, and know your own stuff so that you can take them to the next level. And we talk about English as being a space where we're really teaching kids about expression and communication, as well as the arts of literature and any other arts that we bring in. And to do that, you got to have room for variety. Yeah, and plus it makes it much more fun to grade papers, man, because if everybody's writing the same essay about whether or not it's, Julius Caesar or Brutus as the main character, boring. But if we're going to have a thing at the end of the semester where you're going to tell me what you learned, that I never know what's going to happen. And that's my favorite thing.
So that's one of the cool things I was going to mention. She really practiced what she preaches at the end of the year, at least for my cohort. She tells you, like, she gives you a heads up. Hey, at the end of the class, You
Yeah.
are going to, in whatever way you want, you're going to tell me what you learned. And so
You remember what you did?
yeah, so I did a presentation on everything I learned in Dr. Zoss's class. You could see in Star Wars. And so I
see?
connected, she basically was my Yoda, but I went through this whole thing of how
Yeah.
you can be an amazing teacher using the concepts and the ideas basically from Star Wars. So that was really cool. But we had other people in my cohort. We had one who wrote an opera and
Yes, she wrote a full
Wow.
libretto. Mhm.
Yep.
What?
First
Yep.
time. It was
Yeah,
amazing.
it was unbelievable.
Yep.
We had
And performed it.
yeah, and performed it. And she even showed up in like the gorgeous gown and
Oh, yes.
it was just, I mean, at one point I'm looking around going, what is happening? I can't believe it. This is my life right now. This is so,
That's awesome.
it was amazing. And then
It was.
someone else made a graphic novel and
Yep.
shared those drawings. I can't remember what some of the other people did, but it was just to show you. I mean, it was literally all of us got to shine in who we are and share that, but also tell about what we learned in the class and who we were going to be as teachers because of it.
Wait, I got to know how you frame that up, though. So, as
Okay.
a professor myself, how was that assignment framed up? What did you
It
say
is
to them?
literally called the What I Learned Project.
Nice.
Okay. And the parameters are this: you get 5 minutes. If you work with someone else, you get 10 minutes. We do a rubric where half of it is criteria that we come up with a class, and the other half of the criteria you have to come up with yourself, because I have no idea what you're going to do. So if you bake for class, that's a different set of criteria that you need to determine quality than if Erin is presenting how her learning connects to Star Wars. So the only criteria are they have to be able to make a connection to one of the professional textbooks. So like we use Smagorinsky's book about teaching English by design as an example. And like right now we're using Cornelius Miner's book, and they're actually underneath my microphone at the moment, and April Baker Bell's book. And we're using my book on arts integration, and the Cornelius Miner book is the We Got This, which is a brilliant book. So they have to make a connection to one of those texts. And I also, in that same class, they only have to read 25 books now. It used to be 40. Now it's only 25. But it's it's part of the pandemic. And I'm trying to be mindful of not,
Very nice.
doing all of the things, right? So they read, and so they have to make a connection to a literature text. And then they also have to say how they're, what's important for them in their journey to becoming a teacher, and how do these texts help them do that, and how do things they learn in class help them do that.
Nice.
So that's the criteria I set. So it's like 3 things, right? And then they set the rest of the criteria. And then when we do the performance, half of the points come from a self-evaluation. So they evaluate themselves. And then the other half of the points come from me as an instructor, or whichever doctoral students are learning to teach in my class, they help do the evaluation as well. So it's this complicated rubric for this very simple thing that absolutely blows everybody's minds every year. Like a couple of years ago, I had a student who performed in drag. That has never happened before. That was brilliant.
I love it.
Another 1 year, one of the students she made puppets. She made little tiny dolls, and she had stories for each of the dolls that she handmade from head to toe dolls. Another decided to tell us a story around a campfire. So, we have our classes in downtown Atlanta in a room that has no windows to the outside. So he brought a laptop with a YouTube recording of a fire, and he brought a lantern that he had taped, construction paper flames around. He turned that on, turned the flames on, turned all the lights off, and then told us a story. It was brilliant. This is my favorite part about being an educator, is embracing the surprise, which is what I learned from Elliot Eisner, who's an arts educator and education philosopher who I had the great privilege of taking classes with at Stanford. He said that one of the things that the arts provides us is surprise. And that has been the most exciting part of anything that I do.
That's fantastic. That's a lot. So it's obviously students coming into this program already have an idea of what this is, and they know that there's a bar that's been set, or is it? We
do have a good reputation. Like people know that they know that we are very demanding, because we are. And I'm never shy about that. I'm like, look, I'm going to expect a lot out of you. But they also know that there's this playful element. And, now what we're doing is we're using Goldie Mohammed's work and her historically responsive literacies framework from Cultivating Genius. And one of the pursuits of this framework is joy. And so we take that notion of joy, as well as identity, criticality, intellectuality, and skills. And we put that all into what we're doing. And then we ask them to create lessons in that way as well. So it's hard and it's wonderful all at the same time, I guess.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's very student centered, that's for sure. I mean, the expectation is very high, but a lot of the conversations, a lot of the things that we bring as we read outside, you bring into the classroom, and then the expectation is you collaborate and share and learn from each other, which would be a great thing to see across the nation in all classrooms, right?
Yeah.
So what I love about what you're doing is that when you use a lot of great resources, you have a lot of your own ideas that you take risks in having your students try in the classroom, right? You're modeling that.
Yeah.
But when you see that there's not a tool out there for teachers to use, you create it. And so I'm talking about, let me make sure I get this right. A symphony. Oh, now I'm having a hard time. A symphony of possibilities.
Yes.
Handbook for Arts Integration in Secondary English Language Arts. So, and you co-wrote that. Is it Catherine Macro? I just want to make sure I give her a shout out.
You said it perfectly.
Where did this idea come from? And then we'll talk about what the handbook is for.
So I frequently go to the NCTE conference, which is the National Council of Teachers of English. And, it's a big conference. There might be 10, 15,000 people there. That's a lot of English teachers all in one spot, which it's great. Whenever you go to the city where it's in, you can play spot the English teacher on the street and you can always spot them. It's like when you go to the art educator conference, the NAEA, you can spot the art teacher wherever. And I'm sure for like music educators, I'm sure. Yeah. And because you just, I don't know what it is. There's just some sort of thing.
Coders, Fred? Do you think you can
work? No, we just sit in the corner quietly, ignoring everybody.
with khakis.
With khakis.
See, there's always something, right? There's always something. It's like in Atlanta, when Dragon Con is coming, because you'll see the cosplayers. It's all there. So what were we talking about?
I took you on a sidetrack. Where did the idea come from for the handbook?
For the handbook. So when you go to big conferences, and this is actually a good thing for teachers to know, when you go to big conferences like NCTE, NCTM, the science one, NARST, and all those different ones, it's good to find like the smaller groups of people so that you can really get to know some folks within the organization. And within a group called ELATE, which is the English Language Arts Teacher Educators space, there are these different commissions. There's a commission on social justice, there's a commission on environmental education, and there's a commission on the arts and literacies. And so you can imagine I was hanging out with those folks and eventually chairing the commission. And our commission is really trying to constantly get stuff published and get things done so that more people can have access to this work that there's a whole group of people already doing, and just sort of share all of that good news. Right.
That's cool. Yeah.
And what we found, because from our own experiences, there's a lot of people in there who are former like middle and high school English teachers, and also musicians, and also actors, and also like theater techs. And there was no book about integrating the arts for high schools. There's all kinds of books for elementary level, because people are okay with that. Because people are okay with little kids drawing. They're like, oh, of course, little kids can draw, sure. And, even if you look at materials that are given to kids between kindergarten and third grade, there's always space for drawing and space for writing, like on the materials that you're given. So there's this encouragement of expression through image and language. And then after third grade, all the paper just becomes lined paper with no space for the drawings necessarily. So this, and then people say things like, oh, well, they'll say things like, oh, kids in high school can't handle that. Not true. Or they'll say, oh, there's no time. Not true. Or it's not rigorous enough. Not true.
Mm.
All of those things are things that, we can attend to rigor. We can attend to the details. We can attend to all of the spaces, but we needed a book to sort of bring it all together. And that's when we wrote A Symphony of Possibilities. It took us a really long time to get it published, but we're very proud of the fact that NCTE published it. And they only publish like, I don't know, 5 or 6 books a year. It's not very many. So the fact that we were able to get in and be in that space and publish it sort of in our academic home of sorts, beyond the university, but within the larger continuum of English teachers, that felt pretty good.
Well, I could completely take over this conversation at this point with you because how we're approaching that concept at the university level.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing you say that, and I would love to have a sidebar conversation with you someday, because that's something that is talked about at the higher education level. How it's executed is a totally other story sometimes. I think some schools are doing it really well, obviously, but I think some schools are just trying to cobble together this thing that just isn't coordinated well. And they're just mashing together 2 different topics, hoping something magical happens on the inside when the professors aren't really, really well equipped that, to do what you just laid out there. And having a handbook like that, maybe that's something that also should be directed back towards the other side, because I mean,
get it. It's on Amazon.
I am going to take a look at that. Yeah, I'm going to definitely take a look at that. But that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Because I know how much work that is too. Jeez.
Yeah, and there's some really good chapters in there. I know that the PDF of the introduction is there.
The introduction is free at ncte.org.
Yeah, check it out. And I'm also thinking, just on a side note to something Letitia said about some of the conversation we've been having lately, and that's about, building up your, not just professional development, but your skills. Like, don't be afraid to go out there and find other just add-on certifications that you can do and that kind of thing. I'm thinking, since you mentioned NCTE, I know when I was in the master's program, you guys highly encouraged us to join because of the resources, the materials, and the networking that would be available to us. And if you are in school, there are special pricing for that. But I just want to throw out that I encourage people to find some great networking platforms and things to join. The other thing I was going to say is that if there's anyone out there listening, Michelle, that's maybe nervous about incorporating arts into their classroom because it's not an art class, what would you recommend? Do you have some tips for people?
I do. I think one of the things that I like to think about is you can think expansively about the arts. My background is in visual art. So I feel comfortable bringing in drawings. I make drawings. I encourage kids to make drawings. We make drawings together. We make visual oriented things because that's where my comfort level is. I have colleagues who are actors and they're like, okay, time to tableau. Here we go. You're in groups. Here's the scene and go. I have learned more about that over time because we have a partnership with the Alliance Theater where we do a whole project with them in one of our methods classes. And I also have the one thing I don't know, I love music, but I am not a musician. I am not a singer. I try to sing really quietly when we're singing Happy Birthday because my husband has perfect pitch and he's always like, so I have friends who, when we get together and we have, at NCTE, our Commission on Arts and Literacy, also called COLE, we always have a workshop roundtable session. And 2 of my colleagues always in that session make a song with people who come right then and there. They bring their guitars and they come up with, they create a song based on whatever the current event is. And I'm always like, whoa, wow. So the first thing would be, just really work from a space that So if you're a film lover, so if I'm Erin and I know Star Wars, I know myself, bringing in the film and thinking about, screens, or not screens, but scenes and blocking and lighting, as well as storyline, character development, that would be the way that I would go in.
Yeah, very, very cool. And I'm also sitting here thinking, you're reminding me, so Pete, you're our music guy, right? So I'm curious to hear what you have to say, but this is reminding me of, I might have already told the story of Antigone, one year reading Antigone, and a kid volunteered to read the part for the choir. And I had told them that, there were certain parts we talked about, elements of drama, and that they used to sing these parts. He sang, there's no notes, so he made up the tune to the stanza of the choir in the play. And it was like that opera moment in your class, Michelle, where it was just like everyone's looking around like, don't move because this is amazing. And at the same
Yeah.
time, what is happening? Right. But it's
Yeah.
opening up that space to let people do that and express.
Yeah. And that expression, because there is more to what human beings can express than what words can do, which is why we have musicians, which is why we have artists. We're all living in this strange world of sometimes remote learning, sometimes not, masks and no masks and all of these things. And all throughout this entire pandemic, I have been looking to the artists to see how to think about things, how to frame things, especially when all of the happenings around George Floyd and all of the Black Lives Matters protests, even the Black Lives Matter protests going all the way back to like Trayvon Martin, there's beautiful artwork that comes out of all that, and the expressions that are made through rhythm, through cadence in protesting art. So I'm in Atlanta, so there's lots of we can see video coverage of marches all the time, and there's something really amazing when, especially in the Atlanta mural community, like people will create these things that will delve into the most intense emotions and be as accessible as just a glance. And that is something that I think is amazing. And it's a privilege to be able to see all of those artists doing this work that's now happening all over the place.
I actually had a kid, so I would do an independent reading. I'll call it a project, but I wanted the kids to be able to pick whatever they wanted to read. And I had a kid pick The Art of War. And if you've ever seen The Art of War, it doesn't have a lot of words. So some people argued, well, how much reading is he doing? But it was like, well, it's not just about reading, but it's also the interpretation. There's sometimes less words means there's even more thinking and analyzing and critical thinking to happen. And I always had part of that project, they needed to do some kind of visual or some kind of, art representation. And this young man said he wanted to do some graffiti. So he brought in an old piece of wood, and I let him go out, outside the building, and he brought spray paint and everything. And he did a representation of the Art of War through graffiti. And I thought that was just kind of really interesting, especially the way you just described, we express in different ways, but especially like in the city of Atlanta or in other places, I always look for what's on the tunnels, the buildings, because to me, and this kind of goes into an article you wrote too, it really represents what's going on in the community, what's really important to them, or what's, what they've been going through. And then, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but even you can see as it wears and tears and other things are being added to it, which is something you talk about. You can stop and look what's there now, but you can also kind of get a sense of what was and maybe what will be.
Yes.
Look at that.
There's, in your article about the classroom spaces, I was just going back into that. When I first opened that up, the very first thing that popped into my head when I saw the one picture was, oh my gosh, that's right down the street from me. And immediately I thought about,
but you're in Pennsylvania, right?
Right. And immediately I thought about there's a common language being expressed there, and it's spread. And I would imagine it's all around the world in other places too.
Yes.
And that's I've never really made that connection before and now this conversation is really bringing it to light. It's interesting. It's fascinating with what you just said, Aaron, though, that expressive moment, but yet it's a common expression. It's not a regional expression. I'm sure that there's probably some elements to it that may be more regional, but aside from the letters that say Atlanta, But I think there's certain things that are just tied. They're all tied together, and that's pretty cool.
And it's also public. So it's
Right.
free to the public. And that's something that, when we talk about art, you know, there's like art with the capital A, and there's the art that ends up in the museums, and sort of you have great museums in Pennsylvania. You have like some amazing collections, and we have some amazing collections in Atlanta as well. And there's the art that sort of gets put inside those buildings, and then there's the art that's on the outside of the buildings that's available to everyone, that can also be made by anyone. And there's something about that is very appealing to me as a public school education advocate, educator, and teacher educator, because I want to be able to be in spaces that are available and accessible to everyone. And there's that pretty
Yeah.
The article is so in depth, and Letitia, if I just cut you off, I apologize. Hold one
you're
second.
fine, honey.
The article I want to mention that you co-wrote is Understanding Classroom Spaces as Palimpsest, an opportunity to value complexity in layers. So I feel like we're kind of tapping into some of the ideas in there, and I wanted to make sure you guys got that recognition. Letitia, what are you thinking?
I'm a lover of the arts, and Pete has me embracing that I am an artist, even though I feel like I can't draw worth a lick. But I'm loving that we're talking about this, and I hope that our listening audience and our teachers out there are really embracing the power of the arts, whether it's music, whether it's written, whether it's artistic and visual, because I think, and I'm putting my therapist teacher hat on, I think the arts is really what has saved me during this pandemic. And I think moving forward, I think it's the way that we're going to heal as a world, is to embrace the arts. I mean, I'll tell you, as a clinician, I've been using the arts in my therapy sessions, and I've already seen breakthroughs with clients just by either, listening to lyrics. I'll have them, share with me a favorite song, or I'll show a piece of artwork, 2 pieces of artwork, or using journal prompting. But any form of the arts, whether written, music, or visual arts, I'm just seeing such great breakthrough. And I'm just hoping that we just start incorporating, obviously, not only in the classroom, but in therapy. Because I just feel like the arts is what's going to save us. And I've always been a proponent of that, even as a teacher. Why are we cutting away the arts?
Exactly.
But, I think this is the lemonade. I think the pandemic is opening our eyes to social emotional learning, right? That's now a hot topic.
Everybody wants to talk about that.
Everybody wants to talk about that. But the arts, I feel, is the same. It's the same way. I just really think that this is how we'll heal. And
we don't have to do everything the way that we did in the before times. We don't have to. And Dr. Bettina Love, she's at UGA. She got her PhD at Georgia State. She has a great book called, I don't have it on me, but it's about abolitionist teaching. And it's the idea that we want to, her book is called We Want to Do More Than Survive. And she was adamant throughout sort of her social media stuff in 2020 that we don't have to go back to the way it was. We can do things differently. There's no reason why we have to go back to this. And the arts is a great way to create space. And it's funny because I'm always somebody who's like, well, tell me more, let's see what else we can do. And even in teacher education at the university level, I have to do things that involve measurement. I have to prove, to get our accreditation, we got to prove, by the numbers. Yeah. All those fun things, we still have to do that. And it's funny because I was in charge of assessment for the entire department for a little bit. And I'm the one who's like, why are we counting this? I don't want to count that now. But I also know that I'm constantly telling people, okay, so this is just one measure. What else can we say about it? Because we have to be able to say more and do more than just what can be counted and measured. And that's one of the other things that I'm always telling my students, that Elliot Eisner said. He said, not everything that is important can be measured, and not everything that is measured is important. And I'm always like, yep. That's because I can't measure, the student who performs his learning in drag. I that's not, I mean, I do a rubric thing with it, but because, there's this arbitrary thing that like somehow we have to like make those connections. But there's so much more that happens in that moment. The campfire story is something like it's an opportunity to embrace the moments, those experiences in education. And that's really the stuff that I'm living for in any given moment, because I can't schedule it and I can't like, I never know when it's going to come. So, I'm always trying to, another LA Eisner thing, you're going to create the necessary and sufficient conditions for that to happen. So I'm always trying to do that in these spaces. And I imagine this happens with you guys in this podcast all the time, because you're creating the conditions so that these conversations can happen, so that this learning can happen, and then teachers across the nation and the globe can hear it, and then they can take it and, do something with it for themselves.
Mhm.
It'd be
Well said.
interesting. I'm sure you've done this before, maybe not, but I'm now kind of looking back and thinking, wouldn't it have been interesting for me to have taken a moment and responded to each of my colleagues that shared at the end of your class and said what I learned from them? Because you're
Oh,
right,
yeah.
that in that space, it's not just, us sharing with you and expressing what we've learned and what kind of teachers are going to become because of it. But in that moment, you're also giving an opportunity to share yourself and allow people to learn from you and make connections based on your experiences. So,
And sometimes that does come up in those. Like sometimes people talk about the things that they've learned from their classmates, which is a beautiful moment.
So I have a question for you, and I think you kind of mentioned it. Do you have someone growing up that was a teacher, a mentor, a coach, or someone that you kind of looked up to, or maybe, gave you some kind of spark or made you a little bit of who you are today that you'd like to share?
Yeah. So the last high school that I went to was in Elgin, Illinois, which is one of the suburbs. It's further out to the east of Chicago. And so at that point, I actually took the bus to school on the first day and registered myself and walked into class. And I think it was my second period teacher in the 10th grade. It was the middle of 10th grade. So it was like, it was some day in January when I started. And Carol Morrison was my teacher. And she was like, okay, so here's what you're going to do. We're doing a short story unit. Make sure you read the story twice before each class. And in a couple weeks, you're going to be responsible for leading the discussion. And I was like, all right. And so when I always read, I did what I was told. I was the Hermione Granger. I was the kid who was like raising her hand, and I knew the answer. And I was never afraid to raise my hand when I knew the answer, which in some schools was problematic, but in this school it wasn't. And I had a really good rest of the year with her in the 10th grade. And then in the 11th and 12th grade, she offered creative writing. So my electives when I was in 11th and 12th grade were creative writing and studio art. Do you know, there's a trend there, isn't there?
Yeah, right.
So I worked on the literary magazine, and I had poetry and artwork published in the literary magazine while I was there. So I was constantly doing this, dance with both image and language. And when I was a senior, I was applying to schools and I wasn't quite sure about things. And she was like, you know what, I'm going to take you. She said, my parents were a little bit not as involved. And she said, I'm going to take you to the University of Iowa. Her former student, Aaron Anstedt, was there. He was pursuing his MFA degree there in creative writing in the Iowa Writers Workshop. And she said, we're going to go and you're going to meet Aaron and you're going to see one of his classes and you're going to decide if this is something that's going to work for you. Because my parents weren't interested in doing any of that stuff. So we drove in her car. We drove the 3.5 hours from Elgin to Iowa City. And we were there, we met Aaron, we saw these things. And as we were walking across a pedestrian bridge that's near what's called the Iowa Memorial Union, which is the student union, I thought to myself, I could see myself here. I think I could do this. And so I applied and I got in. And the great thing about going to Iowa, because they have this reputation as a writing school, is that writers would come. So Margaret Atwood came to read from one of her recent books that she was writing in the 90s. And I wrote, I think I called Carol Moore. I used my long distance money to call her and say, Margaret Atwood's coming. And she said, when? And she and her daughter showed up and we all went to see Margaret Atwood in person. I got to see Lucille Clifton in the most packed in room ever. And she did a reading of her poetry in that space as well. I mean, it's still kind of boggles my mind that I got to be in the same room with people of this caliber of writing. And Carol was always just super encouraging. And to thank her, I did two things. I made her a drawing in my freshman year of college. She was a big fan of Hemingway. And so I made, there's this story of the short, happy life of Francis Macomber, I think, where the guy goes up the Mount Kilimanjaro. So I did a drawing of Mount Kilimanjaro with, I think there's a panther or something. There's some sort of animal involved. And then a profile of Hemingway sort of built into it. And she framed that, and it was in her living room for 25 years. It's probably still there. And the other thing I did is when she retired, I wrote a poem for her about what it was like to have her as my teacher.
Wow.
And then she was so grateful for that. She was awesome. I think she was great. She just passed away, like, I think in December of 2019. And so they didn't get to do, or it might have been right. It was like right before COVID exploded. And she saw me for who I was. She was the one who I called when I said, I think I might be a teacher. And she was like, well, of course you can be a teacher, Michelle. Well, duh. And she saw me as a full person, not just a kid on a roster, not just a set of papers to be graded. She saw me as this person. And I was always really grateful for that. And that's one of the things that I strive to be as an educator now, is I try to see my students for who they are.
You definitely do your students proud. And this is kind of an odd moment, and I don't mean to embarrass you, but I'm going to answer that you are one of those people for me, hands down. When I decided to get my master's in teaching, I'd always wanted to be a teacher and just didn't go that route. And one thing led to another, and I decided to go back to school. And so your class and the environment that you created was just something that I always modeled in my classroom. You're not kidding when it was hard. You really set the bar high, but because of that, and I would tell people all the time, I'm a better teacher because of you and because of that program. I know I am. And so when I was department chair, as you know, and I would be the person that could go out and hire, a lot of times I call you and say,
yes, you did.
Do you know anyone? Because I knew what was coming out of her program. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, awesome. And you continue. I mean, that was years ago that I graduated from there, but I've come to you for some things. When I got my first teaching job, I had, furlough was all over the place. So even veteran teachers weren't keeping their jobs. I had 2 offers, and I actually called her up and she said, come in. So I went into her office and we sat down and kind of talked about it. I was conflicted. I had 2 choices, which was amazing at that moment because no one was getting job offers. But there was a little bit of something about each one. And one of them in particular, I felt like just didn't fit my culture and my beliefs. And so but it felt like I had to take a job. And so she walked me through that. So, since you're here, I feel like that I wanted to recognize you and just say, thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I really feel like I am an educator. Who I am as an educator is because of you. So thank you.
Well, you are most welcome. I have to tell you, so I knew this question that you were going to ask me that question. And I was thinking about it earlier and I got all teary eyed because I was thinking about Carol Morrison. because she was such a beautiful person to have in my life. And I hope that every kid somewhere in their education has someone who sees them like that.
Mhm.
And that's why, I think that's one of the reasons why we are so demanding at Georgia State, is because we want our teachers to be those people. And to do that means that you have to know you can't be racist and be in that space. You can't be homophobic and be in that space. You can't be anti-immigrant and be in that space. You just can't. You have to be able to see kids for all of the brilliant parts of them, for all of their brilliance in general.
Mm.
And that's really where we're always trying to be.
Absolutely. Well, this is our segment. We do a little takeaway. So we're going to do a quick takeaway, if that's okay with you, from the
Absolutely.
conversation, something that sparked us, an aha moment, something we're going to carry with us. And then you as our guest get the last word. So you get to say whatever sparked, an idea in you, or just a little bit of something. Does that sound okay?
It sounds awesome.
Okay. So
It's a surprise. I don't know what you're going to say. See, this is my
Wonderful.
favorite thing.
This is your favorite
The
thing.
only thing is when it's your turn, you have to rhyme. So that's the only thing.
And then sing.
I'll do
So
I'll do
you
the
have
best
to
that I can.
sing. You said you don't like to sing, but no, I'm just kidding. Okay, Fred, Abley, why don't you go first for a change?
This is great to hear everything you were saying, and it just is a great reminder. And I love the combination of the arts in that way, that integrative approach. So thank you for reinvigorating my soul here today. It's been a long week. I think the one thing that you said that's echoing and running around my head is demanding but playful, because we talk a lot about what we want to do with our students and where we want to take them, and sometimes we don't forget to also present our genuine self, and we've said that as a continuing theme in our podcast for the past, all these past episodes, not just this past season, this past year, since we began. And I think that's just a really great reminder. And you said it so easily and simply and directly. And I'm glad we got to put that in the front again, because that playful element is an element that's so powerful, because it's what's received so well. It opens up the doors. People get it. They run with the concept. And that was my main takeaway, was the demanding but playful.
Nice.
Beautiful.
How about you, Letitia?
I love that, Fred. I'm writing it down.
Make a t-shirt, Pete. That was
I love
good.
that.
Hashtag
I
it.
love that. I love that. So I do have a quote, but I wanted to start by thanking you, because I wrote here, she has done a brilliant job of creating space for teachers to be flexible, take risks, and going beyond the textbook. I mean, just in our time, my time with you today, I appreciate that as a former recruiter, as someone who developed new teachers, more flexibility and beyond the textbook is so needed. I think they'd fare much better if they went beyond the 450 pages of text.
Yes.
But what my quote is, she saw me as a full person. And that is my hope, that every teacher would see their students as a full person.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
As always. Good.
So the conversation started, Dr. Zoss, the way you opened today, you started with "teachers really saved me," and that's how you ended it. It was full circle. It was so beautiful. So thank you so much. My major takeaway is embrace the surprise, leave room for variety. I know everybody here does that daily. We live that. In my classroom, one of the most favorite things I do is we dramatize and musicalize picture books, storybooks, chapter books.
Yeah.
We'll do poetry. We'll make a soundscape off of poetry, or we'll do a graffiti art on the smart board, and then somebody points to certain parts, and as we move through the art, the kids do things on instruments. It's their signal to do things on instruments. Today we were acting out a book, The Vanishing Pumpkin, and we were acting it out, and this third grader lit up, and he's quite a firecracker, but I love him, and he's quite musical, and he's, hey, I hear something, and he's trying to do the song, And again, we set the xylophones up like a pumpkin patch, and the characters walk around it. And so I hear something. I said, well, what do you hear? He says, I hear a song. I hear it home. And he starts playing, and he starts to da dun 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 dun. He started playing "We Don't Need No Education" from Pink Floyd. I was like, yes.
Fantastic.
Damn, that was awesome. So I embraced the surprise, leave room for variety, because it was awesome. And then one kid, oh, I know that. I heard that. And then they all started. And I said, oh, throw away Vanishing Pumpkin. It vanished. We'll start talking about it. And they started making up their own songs. It was the greatest moment. And I could see uptight teachers being uncomfortable with that. But I love when that stuff happens.
Yeah.
So, but I totally believe in what you're saying. Tk you very much.
Oh, what a beautiful moment. Thank you for sharing that with us. That was great.
You would so nerd out in his classroom. I mean, you would just lose your mind.
Really?
Crazy.
So mine is tied to Peter with the love of the surprise part of teaching. I think a lot of times when we get into the schools, there's this idea of lesson planning, measurement, this constant
data,
trying to standardize everything. And so, I mean, Pete just gave the best example. It's those moments that they surprise you that are the best, those are the things you're going to always remember. And you're going to go home that day with a smile on your face, even if it was a crazy, ridiculous surprise, because that's your life, right? That's part of seeing the whole child, Letitia, right? Is whatever moment that they shined or didn't shine. It's just beautiful because that makes us human.
Yeah.
So now it's your turn. You get the last word.
Well, I think I want to say two things. First, I want to say thank you to all four of you, because this is, I feel like this is a little bit of a rock star moment to be part of your podcast. So I'm genuinely honored that I could be here and hang out with you guys and talk about cool things about education. So thank you very much for inviting me to be here. I am truly honored. And the second thing that I want to say is that one of the things that makes teaching both wonderful and hard is that sometimes, we do all of this work, and I tell students all the time, we're planting little seeds and we're cultivating them and nurturing them to grow, but we never quite know where the seeds end up or what plants grow, or, we never know all of those things. And so in the moments where you get to be able to be in the presence of a former student and to hear what I have contributed to them, I think is one of the greatest gifts ever, because we never know what our students are going to take out of our classes, right? And like that moment of, I have a memory of having that conversation with you, and remembering that you were changing careers, Aaron, and I remember feeling that you were a little bit nervous about it. And I was like, no, you're gonna be fine, because you know all of this good stuff already. We're just going to build on all of what you know. And to know that made a difference for you, that makes my whole week. that makes it so that, we don't always know if what we're doing is the right thing or the best thing. And when we get feedback or we get that response that something we did help put some good in the world, that's amazing. So thank you for being willing to share that today.
Yeah, no, thank you. All right. So if some people want to connect with you, is the best way for them to find you through Georgia State University, or how would you like them to reach out?
Yeah, Georgia State University is the easiest way. You can Google me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on ResearchGate. I have a Google Scholar profile. Woo! But you can email me at zoss@gsu.edu. I'm the only Zoss at Georgia State, so I took that name and I was like, yeah, I'll be the Zoss. So
you are the only Zoss.
I am the only Zoss. I'm not the only Dr. Zoss now. We have more family members getting doctorates and stuff, which is cool.
That's very cool.
So when we get together for the holidays, we're like, hi, Dr. Zoss. Hi, Dr. Zoss. Doctor.
Doctor. That's amazing. And Pete, where can our TPR crew find us?
Our website, teacherpeprally.com. Whatever you're listening to, whatever platform you prefer, please leave us a review. That would be great. Keep the conversation going. And our Facebook group is going. And our hotline, Erin.
Oh, our hotline.
Our hotline.
Yeah, you can call us now. It's 678
Mm-hmm.
439 TPR1. And the hotline is really for you to, this is the Teachers Pep Rally. So if you want to leave a message for fellow educators, just to keep us pumped, keep us going. Some of us I know we're losing a little bit of steam, but we can do this. So
Give us a
call the
call.
hotline 678-439 TPR1, and you just might hear your cheer on our next episode.
That's awesome.
I know, right? Yeah, we found the budget this season, so we figured why not spend it on the
Sweet.
bill.
Well
Splurge
done.
online.
Well, thank you again for being on here. We loved having you.
It was really a pleasure to be here. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Nice.
Thank you for the great work you're doing, Michelle. That's awesome.